Maeve had always been proud of the little green routines she picked up over the years. At 67, she was the kind of woman who still walked to the market every Sunday morning, canvas tote in hand, selecting her produce with care. She believed in the power of real food. Her fridge was never without fresh herbs, her pantry lined with chia seeds and olive oil. But the one thing she never skipped, not for a single week, was her avocado. Half for breakfast, sometimes the rest in a salad. Smooth, creamy, good for the heart, or so she thought. It was late one evening when Maeve first noticed something odd, a dull ache beneath her ribs, like pressure blooming quietly in her upper abdomen. At first, she chalked it up to indigestion. She had, after all, added a new avocado smoothie recipe from a YouTube video, unripe, but she figured the blender would smooth things out. That night, she barely slept. Waves of nausea rolled in and out. By morning, the ache had sharpened. Her daughter, worried, drove her to urgent care. Blood work, liver enzymes elevated. The doctor asked gently, "Have you added anything new to your diet recently?" She mentioned the smoothie, offhandedly. "Just avocado. I thought it was healthy." The doctor didn't smile. Instead, he sighed and began asking more questions. Did she know about persin? Had she eaten the seed? Was the fruit ripe? Was she on any medications? Maeve's eyebrows furrowed. It never occurred to her that something so widely praised could carry risks. She felt a quiet embarrassment, not just for being wrong, but for how little she really knew. Somewhere deep down, she had assumed her careful choices guaranteed her safety, that if it came from the earth and looked like health, it couldn't possibly harm her. Over the next few weeks, Maeve started reading and listening. Not the kind of frantic Googling that sends people into spirals, but real research. She spoke to a nutritionist, learned how vitamin K can interact with blood thinners, discovered that heating avocado above a certain temperature turns its good fats into compounds no one wants in their body. She even read about a case, a woman just a few years younger, who ended up in surgery after grinding up avocado seeds because some influencer called it the ultimate antioxidant hack. Maeve shook her head. "We're all trying to do right," she whispered to herself. "But sometimes we're doing it all wrong." She didn't stop eating avocados. That's not where her journey led. But she did stop trusting health headlines blindly. She began to ask better questions about food, about preparation, about how her aging body was changing in ways that deserved gentler, wiser choices. Maeve started keeping a small journal of how different foods made her feel. She added lemon juice to her stored avocado halves. She began eating only ripe ones, never green, never bitter, and slowly the discomfort disappeared. In its place, there was something else, a quiet confidence that comes when you realize healing isn't about perfection. It's about learning, about noticing, about knowing that the line between help and harm can be as thin as a slice of fruit. So if you've ever thought, "It's just avocado, it must be fine," Maeve would ask you, lovingly, to listen a little deeper today. Because the smallest habits, the tiniest mistakes, can either heal us or quietly hurt us. And it's not about fear, it's about knowledge, it's about grace. And sometimes all it takes is one gentle correction to protect everything we still want to enjoy. The morning after her urgent care visit, Maeve stood at the counter, quietly staring at the halved avocado she'd wrapped up the night before. The pit was still nestled inside, just as she'd always done. It was something her mother had taught her. Leave the seed in and it won't brown. It felt almost sacred, that little tradition. But now, with her stomach still tender and her thoughts racing, it felt different, like maybe that pit had been lying to her all along. She remembered the doctor's words. Don't assume an old trick is a safe one, especially not with storage. Maeve didn't push back at the time, but in her heart, she'd been skeptical. How could something so harmless looking be part of the problem? But then she went home and started reading, not the glossy articles, but real reports. One in particular chilled her. An FDA bulletin from 2021 warning that improperly stored avocados, especially those left too long with the pit still in, could harbor harmful bacteria. Listeria. The name itself made her stomach twist. It wasn't just about browning, it was about safety, about life. She remembered the soft green dip she made every Sunday for her neighbor Tom, who loved her guacamole. She thought about the time she left it in the fridge for a couple of days before serving it again, just added a little lemon juice, stirred it, and hoped for the best. Her chest tightened. Could she have unknowingly risked someone else's health too? The thought made her fingers tremble slightly as she placed the avocado on the cutting board. This time, she did it differently. She brushed the exposed half with lemon juice first. Then she wrapped it tightly in cling film, pressing the plastic right against the surface. She placed it in the crisper drawer, gently, as though putting a baby to sleep. There was something so strange about it all, how this everyday fruit had gone from comfort food to cautionary tale in less than 48 hours. Maeve didn't blame the avocado. She blamed how little we're told about the way we eat, the quiet routines that go unquestioned. And in that moment, she realized something. Maybe aging isn't about resisting change. It's about being willing to learn again. The older she got, the more she realized that the smallest shifts, like storing something the right way, could be acts of protection, of love, not just for herself, but for the people she fed. Later that afternoon, her daughter called to check in. Maeve told her everything, the pit, the bacteria, the new method. Her daughter listened carefully, then laughed gently. "Mom, you're turning into a scientist." Maeve smiled, a little proud. Maybe she was. Or maybe she was just waking up to the truth that health isn't in the big, dramatic changes, but in the quiet, daily rituals we choose to revisit, revise, and finally get right. Maeve hadn't thought much about her medication routine in years. Every morning, like clockwork, she took her warfarin with a sip of water and half a banana. Her doctor had prescribed it after a minor heart scare 4 years back, and since then, her levels had been stable, reliable, predictable. She liked it that way, no surprises. But as she sat by the window one quiet afternoon, reviewing her food journal, something clicked. She'd been eating more avocado than usual lately. The smoothie, the toast, even a little avocado chocolate pudding her neighbor had brought over. It hadn't even occurred to her to wonder whether it mattered. It was healthy, wasn't it? The next day, at her routine checkup, Maeve casually mentioned it. "I've really fallen in love with avocados lately," she said with a small laugh. The nurse's head lifted slightly. "Are you still on warfarin?" Maeve nodded. That was when they ordered an INR test on the spot. She didn't expect the result. Her number had dipped, not dangerously low, but lower than usual. Her doctor raised an eyebrow and gently asked, "Any recent changes in diet?" That's when it hit her. Avocados and warfarin might not be friends. That night, Maeve sat in her kitchen with a cup of chamomile, reading with furrowed brows. The more she read, the more sobering the truth became. Avocados, rich in vitamin K, could alter how her blood thinner worked, even neutralize it. She didn't need to eliminate them, but the balance had to be precise. Her dose of warfarin was calibrated to her usual vitamin K intake. Adding in more, even in the form of this innocent, buttery fruit, was enough to throw the whole system off. Maeve felt betrayed, not by the avocado, not by her body, but by the silence. Why hadn't anyone told her this before? She'd seen countless doctors over the years, and not one had warned her about vitamin K and warfarin interactions in daily foods. It wasn't negligence, it was just the kind of detail that gets lost in the cracks. But when you're over 60, it's those very cracks that can trip you up. She made a decision that evening, not out of fear, but out of care. From now on, she'd be consistent. If she was going to have avocado, she'd have it in small, regular amounts, not in bursts. No more feast and famine approach. She called her doctor to discuss adjusting her dosage slightly. They agreed on a plan. A half avocado 3 times a week and regular INR monitoring for a month. No guesswork, no hoping. It felt good, not restricting, freeing. Maeve had always believed in listening to her body, but now she was learning to listen to her medication too. The quiet chemistry inside her, the balance that kept her heart steady, it deserved attention. It deserved respect. A few weeks later, her levels were back to normal. She still enjoyed her avocado toast, but now she paired it with awareness and a notebook. Her daughter called it Maeve's avocado math, and they'd laugh about it. But beneath the joke was something far more powerful. A woman reclaiming her agency, not just over what she ate, but how it worked in her, harmoniously, wisely, without fear. It was a Tuesday when it happened, the kind of morning Maeve usually looked forward to. Her weekly walk with Denise had been postponed due to rain, so she decided to make herself a treat. A green smoothie, thick and cold, with spinach, frozen banana, and half an avocado. The only problem was the avocado. It was hard as a rock, but Maeve had seen a video the night before. Some young woman blending one up like it was no big deal. The blender will break it down, she'd said, smiling. Maeve thought, why not? She chopped it up, tossed it in, and turned the machine on. The smoothie was thick and gritty, not her usual velvety green, but she drank it anyway. By mid-morning, she was regretting it. Her stomach started churning, a heavy fullness settling beneath her ribs like wet cement. She lay down on the couch, hand on her belly, waves of cramping pulsing through her. At first she thought it was food poisoning, but it wasn't quite the same. No fever, no vomiting, just this pressure and bloating. She didn't feel sick, just off, a quiet discomfort that didn't go away. That evening, her daughter dropped by. Maeve told her what had happened, and after listening, her daughter asked the one question that shifted everything. Was the avocado ripe? Maeve blinked. No, but it was going in a smoothie, so I figured it'd be fine. Her daughter's face changed. Mom, unripe avocados are hard on your gut, especially at our age. Maeve had never heard that before, not once. But the next day, curious and a little unsettled, she searched for answers. That's when she found it. Study after study linking unripe avocados to digestive issues. Higher levels of persin, a natural toxin, more resistant starches and tannins, things the gut can struggle with, especially in aging bodies. What shocked her wasn't just the science, it was how invisible this knowledge was. No labels, no warnings, not even a whisper in those feel-good recipe blogs. She thought back to the last few weeks, the unexplained sluggishness, the bloating after her morning smoothies. She'd been blaming age or hormones. But what if it was this one quiet mistake? Eating something her body wasn't ready to handle. So Maeve made a new rule, a gentle one. If it wasn't soft, it didn't go in the blender. She learned the avocado test, a gentle squeeze, the pop of the stem revealing that soft green center. If it didn't pass, it waited. She started keeping a ripening bowl on the windowsill with a banana tucked in beside her avocados. She even wrote the date on a little sticky note. Within days, she felt the difference. No more heaviness, no more post-smoothie regret. Just calm, quiet digestion. The kind of peace you don't notice until it's gone, and celebrate when it returns. More than anything, Maeve felt seen, not by others, but by herself. For the first time in a long time, she was listening to her body not as a problem to fix, but as a partner to understand. And that changed everything. The reaction didn't happen immediately. Maeve had just returned from a lovely lunch with her book club, a cozy little cafe down the street where they served avocado hummus on warm pita slices. She'd eaten it before, or at least she thought she had, but something was different this time. By the time she got home, her mouth felt strange, tingling around her lips, a slight itch in her throat. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of thing you rush to the ER for, but it was noticeable. And it was new. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe the spices were stronger than usual. Maybe she was just tired. But the feeling lingered well into the evening. And then, out of nowhere, came the swelling. Not severe, but enough to make her pause in front of the mirror, her lower lip looking just a little fuller, the skin around her neck a bit flushed. Maeve sat down, heartbeat ticking a little faster than before. Her body was whispering something, and she knew better than to ignore it. The next day, she called her allergist. It had been years since her last panel, something about dust mites and mild seasonal pollen. Nothing serious, but this was different. When the results came back, Maeve was stunned. Latex fruit syndrome, the doctor said gently. She was sensitive to latex, not severely, but enough to react to certain foods that shared the same proteins. Avocados were at the top of the list. Maeve felt a chill pass through her. How had no one told her this before? She'd worn latex gloves in her gardening days, always assumed the itch was just dry skin. And now, here she was, realizing that the very food she thought was helping her heart could be quietly triggering her immune system. The doctor explained that people with latex sensitivity often react to bananas, kiwis, papayas, and yes, avocados. And it wasn't just about eating them. Even avocado oil or guacamole made by someone wearing latex gloves could set off a response. It was like her world tilted slightly, familiar foods now carrying a shadow she hadn't seen before. But Maeve didn't panic. She adjusted. She began reading labels more closely. She called ahead to restaurants. She swapped her avocado oil for olive oil and used tahini instead of avocado in dips. She found alternatives that didn't stir up that quiet itch or leave her worrying late at night. And most importantly, she told her daughter, her grandkids, her neighbors, because if it could happen to her, it could happen to someone else too. Someone who'd never think to make the connection between a rubber glove and a bowl of guacamole. And in that, Maeve found power again, not in cutting things out, but in knowing, in listening, in advocating for herself in a world that often overlooked these gentle warnings. Her body wasn't betraying her, it was protecting her. She just had to understand the language it was speaking. Now, when Maeve walks through the grocery store, she doesn't avoid the avocado section out of fear. She simply nods at it with quiet wisdom, knowing that love for food isn't about blind trust. It's about discernment. And that kind of love, that's what keeps her strong. Maeve's granddaughter had sent her the video. "Look, Grandma," she'd said, excitedly tapping her phone. "People are grinding avocado seeds into smoothies now. They say it has way more antioxidants than the fruit itself." Maeve smiled politely, watching the influencer on screen toss a whole avocado seed into an industrial blender like it was no big deal. "Can you believe this is the part we've been throwing away?" the woman beamed. Maeve raised her brows and gave a soft laugh, but something in her gut clenched. She'd heard trends come and go, but this one? It felt reckless. Still, curiosity tugged at her. That evening, she read more, not on social media, but through the FDA archives and toxicology briefs. And what she uncovered left her breathless. Yes, the seed held some antioxidant compounds, but it also held persin in concentrations dozens of times higher than the flesh. Worse still, Maeve learned the seed contained cyanogenic glycosides, substances that could convert into small amounts of cyanide in the human body. Not enough to kill a healthy adult immediately maybe, but for seniors, for those with compromised digestion or heart issues, even small disruptions could have large consequences. She thought of her own gut, still healing from that unripe smoothie just weeks earlier. She imagined those hard seed shards grinding against the delicate walls of her intestine. And suddenly, the smoothie trend didn't feel adventurous. It felt violent. But what truly stopped her was reading about the surgeries. Real stories, not anecdotes, of people who had ended up in emergency rooms with intestinal tears or blockages from trying to eat what their body was never meant to digest. One woman, just 26, had needed surgical repair after weeks of adding seed powder to her smoothies. "The fibers don't break down," one gastroenterologist explained. "Your body treats them like invaders." Maeve closed her laptop slowly, placing her hand on her stomach as if to reassure it. "We won't be doing that." She got up and walked to the kitchen where a single avocado sat waiting in the fruit bowl. She cut it open with a steady hand, twisted the two halves apart, and held the seed in her palm. It was dense, dark, solid, and it belonged outside her body. She placed it in the compost bin with reverence, not as waste, but as wisdom. That weekend at brunch, her neighbor Ellen asked her if she'd tried that new avocado seed powder. Maeve smiled gently and shook her head. "No, Ellen, I like my intestines right where they are, and in one piece." They both laughed. But beneath the humor was something much deeper, an understanding that not every health trend is made for us, especially not for aging bodies that need care, not experiments. She told her granddaughter later with love, "Sweetheart, sometimes nature gives us a boundary on purpose. Just because something fits in a blender doesn't mean it belongs inside us." It wasn't about fear, it wasn't even about the seed, it was about learning where nourishment ends and noise begins. And for Maeve, that seed marked the line. Maeve always loved trying new recipes. It made her feel alive, curious. So when a cooking show featured grilled avocado halves stuffed with quinoa and drizzled with tahini, she couldn't resist. "Avocados on the grill, imagine that," she told her neighbor Tom, who looked intrigued and mildly skeptical. She sliced one open, brushed it with olive oil, and placed it flesh side down on the pan. The sizzle was immediate, and the kitchen filled with a nutty aroma. It felt gourmet, healthy, elegant, but hours later, her body told a different story. She didn't feel sick exactly, just off. Her stomach was heavy again, a strange bitterness lingered in her mouth, even after brushing her teeth. She felt sluggish, her energy slow to return. She chalked it up to a heavy lunch, maybe a little too much oil. But the next time she tried the recipe, grilled again, this time in the oven, the same thing happened, and that's when Maeve paused. She remembered something her doctor once said: "The way you prepare something can be just as important as what it is." So, as she had before, Maeve began to look deeper. She discovered that avocados, for all their creamy, heart-healthy goodness, don't tolerate heat well. The very fats that make them beneficial, the monounsaturated oleic acids, begin to break down at high temperatures, releasing compounds like aldehydes and acrylamide, both linked to oxidative stress and even cancer risk. Studies showed that once avocado oil passes its smoke point, a relatively low 271 degrees, it can shift from healing to harmful in under 10 minutes. And that bitterness she'd noticed, that was the fat degrading. That sluggishness, her body trying to process substances it was never meant to absorb in those forms. The vitamins she thought she was nourishing herself with, vitamin C, folate, B6, were being destroyed in the heat. The heart-supporting fats were morphing into cellular stressors. Maeve sat quietly with the research, her hands in her lap, her breath steady. She wasn't angry, just humbled. It struck her how subtle the shift had been. No alarm bells, no pain, just a creeping erosion of vitality after a meal that looked, and even tasted, healthy. But now she understood. The body doesn't just care about the label, it cares about the details. That evening, she stood in her kitchen again, this time making her signature avocado dressing. Fresh lemon juice, garlic, a dash of sea salt, all whirled into a smooth, cold blend. She drizzled it over roasted sweet potatoes and a warm lentil salad. The avocado never touched heat. It remained intact, whole, alive. It felt right. Her energy returned, her digestion settled, and more than anything, Maeve felt a deep, quiet alignment with her body. Like they were finally speaking the same language. A language of respect, not control, not fear, just honest care. Maeve never gave up her avocados, but she gave up the illusion that health is about ingredients alone. For her, it became about relationship, listening, timing, temperature. She learned that even something as small as when you add a slice to your plate can change everything about how it behaves inside you. And that's the story she now tells her friends, her daughter, even her skeptical neighbor Tom. Avocados are powerful, but only when you treat them with the same care you'd want for yourself. That's the real secret, not just eating smart, but eating with awareness. And in Maeve's quiet, thoughtful way, that became her greatest health transformation of all. It had been 3 months since Maeve first noticed the discomfort. 3 months since the smoothie incident, since the storage revelation, since that unsettling day in urgent care. Now, as she stood by the window in the soft morning light, peeling an orange with one hand and gently testing an avocado with the other, there was something different in her presence. Not fear, not control, just a grounded stillness, like she'd finally found a rhythm her body trusted. The avocado yielded slightly in her palm, just right. She smiled and placed it on the cutting board. She no longer rushed breakfast. Mornings had become her quiet sanctuary, not a checklist, but a conversation. She no longer saw food as just fuel. Each slice, each texture was a message, a gesture of care. She made her tea slowly, letting the steam rise like a signal to slow down. Her daughter once said, "Mom, you've turned eating into a ceremony." Maeve only smiled. Maybe she had. She still kept a food journal, not obsessively, but thoughtfully, a log of gratitude, not guilt. Half avocado, ripe, no bloating, felt light. Smoothie with lemon, no seed, added flax, good energy. It wasn't about perfection. Some days she skipped the avocado altogether. Others, she shared it with Tom over toast and herbs, but every time she chose it on purpose, with awareness. That was the shift. That was the healing. And something else had softened in her, the need to prove she was doing everything right. For years, Maeve had lived under that quiet pressure. Eat clean, age gracefully, avoid mistakes. But now she saw it differently. Aging wasn't a test. It was a dialogue, a continual unfolding of what it meant to love a changing body. One Sunday, as her granddaughter visited and poked curiously through the fridge, she held up an avocado and grinned. "Is this one of your science fruits, Grandma?" Maeve laughed, took it from her, and showed her the little stem button. "Press here. If it's green underneath, it's ready." They tested it together. It popped off perfectly. Green. Ready. And Maeve thought maybe this was it. Maybe the real legacy wasn't in what she ate, but in what she passed down. The art of noticing. The courage to learn. The wisdom to unlearn. She didn't need a final moment of triumph. No doctor's report. No dramatic transformation photo. Her victory was quieter, found in the way her breath deepened after breakfast, and how her sleep no longer broke from stomach unrest, in the gentle pride she felt teaching others what took her a lifetime to realize. As she sat down to her morning plate, a soft-boiled egg, greens, and that perfect avocado half, Maeve closed her eyes for a moment. Not in prayer, not in performance, just presence. She had come full circle, and this time the ritual was hers. The phone call came just after dinner. It was Ellen, Maeve's friend from church. Her voice was tight, words clipped at the edges. "Maeve, I think I messed up." Maeve sat up straighter, her hands still damp from washing dishes. Ellen explained her husband, Jerry, had been feeling unwell for days. Stomach cramps, strange bloating, even a little chest tightness. They'd both assumed it was stress, but this evening, after a heavy dinner, he'd gotten worse, sweating, lightheaded. They were on their way to urgent care now. Maeve asked gently, "Did you eat anything new?" Ellen hesitated. "Just that smoothie recipe you gave me, the green one. But I didn't have ripe avocados, so I used the firm ones. Is that bad?" Maeve closed her eyes for a moment. "Yes, love, it can be. Tell the doctors what he ate. Mention the avocados, every detail." That night, Maeve sat in her living room long after the phone call ended, fingers clasped in her lap. It was a strange feeling, knowing her knowledge could help, but also knowing that someone had nearly gotten hurt trying to follow in her footsteps. It reminded her just how delicate this line was between health and harm, especially when it came cloaked in the word natural. Ellen called the next morning. Jerry was stable. The doctors had ruled out anything catastrophic, but his gut was inflamed, his blood pressure irregular. They believed it had been brought on by unripe avocado consumption combined with dehydration and mild medication interaction. "They said he's lucky," Ellen whispered. "We almost didn't mention the smoothie at all, but your voice was in my head." Maeve exhaled, relief washing through her. And then a quiet resolve settled in. She started writing that afternoon. Not a blog, not a post, just a small guide she printed out for friends. "If you eat avocados, read this first," the title said in bold. It was simple, warm, and filled with stories, not rules. She included everything she had learned: the ripeness test, the vitamin K interaction, the seed danger, the heat damage, the latex connection. She printed 10 copies and brought them to her next community meeting. To her surprise, people leaned in. They asked questions, took notes. One man admitted he'd been microwaving hard avocados for years. A woman said she'd been juicing them with the seed. Another confessed she never knew about the drug interaction, and she was on warfarin too. Maeve didn't speak like a teacher. She spoke like someone who had simply been there, and who didn't want anyone else to go through what she did, blindly. What started as personal healing had become something wider, community wisdom, and it didn't feel heavy, it felt right. Sharing didn't drain her, it filled her. She realized something that day. When you get older, people often assume you have nothing new to learn. But Maeve had learned more in the past 3 months than she had in the last 3 years. And now, she was giving that back. Later that week, her granddaughter taped the little guide to their fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. "Avocado rules," she said with a giggle. "You're like a food whisperer now." Maeve smiled. "No, sweet girl, I just listen more carefully now." Maeve hadn't planned on crying over an avocado, but that morning, as she scooped the soft green flesh onto a slice of warm toast, something caught her, a smell, a texture, a memory she hadn't touched in years. She froze, knife still in hand, as her eyes suddenly prickled with heat. It wasn't the fruit itself. It was the moment it brought her back to, her mother's kitchen, the faded sunlight through gauzy curtains, and a younger Maeve watching those practiced hands slice an avocado in half with one clean motion. Her mother had been ahead of her time, always leaning toward whole foods, plant oils, and homegrown herbs. Every Sunday morning, she made toast with mashed avocado and sea salt long before it was trendy. "Food can be a hug," she used to say, placing the plate in front of Maeve like it was sacred. As a child, Maeve never understood. As a teenager, she rolled her eyes. And now, at 67, she understood more than she ever had before. She set the knife down and sat at the table, the toast untouched in front of her. There was something both humbling and healing in the realization. This fruit she'd nearly feared, nearly mishandled into illness, was once part of the deepest comfort she knew. And now, it was hers again, only this time, with intention. For weeks now, food had felt like a checklist: safe or not safe, acidic or alkaline, too ripe, not ripe enough. But this morning, she allowed herself to feel the emotion of it again, the joy, the love, the memory. She took one bite slowly, eyes closed, and whispered softly, "Thanks, Mom." There was no audience, no performance, just a quiet reconnection to her body, yes, but also to the lineage of care that had begun long before she'd realized it. Later that day, she brought an extra avocado to her neighbor Tom. She didn't lecture, just knocked on his door, handed him the fruit, and said, "This one's perfectly ripe. Be gentle with it." He chuckled and accepted it with the kind of reverence that can only come from a friendship built on tiny kindnesses. That's what Maeve had learned, perhaps more than anything. Food is not about rules. It's about relationship, with herself, with others, with her past. That evening, she found a photo tucked in one of her old cookbooks. It was her mother standing in the kitchen, avocado in hand, smiling in that effortlessly wise way she always did. Maeve framed it and set it near the windowsill where her avocados now ripened in a ceramic bowl. It wasn't just decorative, it was grounding. A reminder that health is never just about nutrients, it's about memory, emotion, story. Maeve still checked for ripeness, still avoided the seed, still never grilled them. But something had changed. She no longer approached avocado with fear or confusion. She approached it with love and with deep, earned respect. And now, each time she cut one open, she did so gently, almost ceremonially, as if unearthing a gift from both her mother and her own journey, not just food, a thread through time. Maeve had always thought of aging like a staircase heading down, slowly, gently, but inevitably. The body creaks more, energy softens. Foods that once nourished now cause heartburn. You become more cautious, more aware of your limits. But something had shifted in her recently. It wasn't that her aches had vanished or that she suddenly felt 20 again. No, it was subtler, quieter. She had stopped seeing aging as a list of losses. And that began, strangely enough, with an avocado. Not just the fruit itself, but what it had revealed. How one small, ordinary thing could carry such complexity. A nutrient powerhouse one day, a digestive threat the next, depending on how you touched it, prepared it, stored it, combined it. Maeve began to wonder, maybe she too was like that. Maybe aging didn't mean she was breaking, maybe it meant she needed a different kind of handling. She'd learned to eat slower, to listen closer, to pause before reaching for something just because a label said healthy. And in doing so, she noticed other changes. Her skin didn't flush as often after meals. Her energy didn't crash mid-afternoon. Even her sleep, once shallow and interrupted, began to deepen. She didn't chase big goals anymore. She chased balance. And balance, she found, was profoundly healing. One evening, as she sat with her daughter on the back porch, sipping warm tea with a splash of lemon and mint, they got to talking about aging. "I just don't want to become one of those women," her daughter said, "obsessed with what I can't eat, what I can't do." Maeve smiled gently. "You don't have to. You just have to start noticing, not restricting, not fearing, just paying attention." Her daughter looked at her, tilting her head. "You seem more peaceful lately." Maeve didn't deny it, because it was true. She no longer carried the same quiet resentment about growing older. She'd stopped fighting it and started partnering with it. That was the real change. It wasn't about the avocado, it was about what the avocado taught her, that thriving didn't come from control, but from relationship. Aging wasn't decline, it was refinement. The same way she now chose softer foods that supported her digestion, she also chose softer habits, gentler mornings, walks without a watch, friendships that felt like sunlight. She spent less time performing wellness and more time living it. She no longer needed to prove she could do it all. She just wanted to do what mattered, well, fully and with love. And now, each time she sliced open an avocado and saw that smooth green flesh, she smiled, not just because it was ripe, but because she was too. Ripe, not past her prime, but finally ready. Ready to be herself without apology. Ready to honor her body, not for what it used to be, but for what it carried her through. That was the true shift, not just in food, not just in health, but in how Maeve saw herself. She wasn't falling, she was growing, deeper, slower, wiser, and it had started with a single question whispered one morning in her kitchen. What if I treated myself as tenderly as I treat this fruit? Maeve's journey began with a single assumption that eating something labeled healthy was always safe. But along the way, she uncovered something far more powerful than any food trend: awareness. From storing avocados with the pit to unknowingly disrupting her medication balance, from painful digestive reactions to the quiet warning of an allergic response, Maeve learned that the way we treat our food is inseparable from the way we treat our bodies. But perhaps the greatest transformation wasn't what she changed on her plate. It was how she saw herself in the process. She no longer moved through life reacting. She began noticing, listening, honoring the small signals that used to get ignored or explained away. Aging stopped being something to fear and instead became a season of refinement, a chance to relearn, to soften, to align. And now, as she slices into an avocado, gently, with care, it isn't just a routine. It's a ritual of remembrance, a symbol of how even the most ordinary things can harm us if we don't pay attention, and how quickly they can become sacred again once we do. So if you've ever thought, it's just food, it can't matter that much, let Maeve's story be a soft reminder. Even one small shift, a different way to cut, to store, to time, can protect more than your health. It can restore your peace, and maybe, just maybe, the next time you reach for something familiar, you'll pause and choose a little more gently, because real wellness doesn't begin with rules, it begins with care.